Princess Mérida wants nothing more than to become a great archer. When she gets into a fight with her mother about this, she makes a reckless decision that puts the entire kingdom in danger. Today, we will recap the story of the 2012 movie Brave. The film starts in medieval Scotland, where Queen Elinor is spending time with her daughter Mérida on her 6th birthday. Mérida receives a bow as a gift from her father, King Fergus, who also teaches her how to use it. While playing with her new bow, Mérida accidentally shoots an arrow into the woods. Fergus asks her to go retrieve it, and as she does, she sees a wisp. Following the trail of wisps, she finds herself lost in the woods until she reunites with her parents, who are attacked by a demon named Mordo. While Fergus and his men fight the bear, Elinor and Mérida manage to escape. Fast forward 10 years, Mérida is now 16, and her mother Elinor is teaching her how to be a proper princess. However, Mérida is unhappy with her mother's control over her life. Elinor insists that a princess must strive for perfection, and imparts all the knowledge that Mérida needs to know. One day, Mérida manages to sneak out of the castle and takes a day off. She rides her horse into the woods and practices shooting at targets she set up. Mérida shows off her skills by hitting all the targets, and continues riding until she reaches a cliff. She climbs a rock and drinks water from a nearby waterfall. That evening, Mérida returns to the castle and puts her horse into the stable. She sneaks into the kitchen and steals some pastries before heading to the dining hall, where her family is eating. Mérida sees her father telling her younger triplet brothers the story of how he lost his leg while fighting Mordo. Mérida completes the story for Fergus and then sits with the others. She tries to tell her mother about her adventures in the woods, but Elinor doesn't seem to listen. Meanwhile, a maid hands Elinor some letters, which she reads as Fergus plays with his dogs. Elinor discovers that the lords of the kingdom have accepted to present their sons as suitors for Mérida's betrothal. While the triplets are excused, Mérida refuses to get betrothed, but Elinor informs her that she doesn't have a choice, and Mérida storms out of the room. Later on, Elinor visits Mérida in her room and tells her a story about a kingdom that fell into chaos and war because the oldest prince refused to rule with his siblings according to tradition. Elinor tries to convince Mérida that marriage isn't the end of the world, and advises her to make peace with it. Meanwhile, Elinor returns to her room and talks to Fergus about the situation. At the same time, Mérida talks to her horse Angus and vows not to let the betrothal happen. The following day, the lords of the kingdom arrive with their troops and enter the castle. Fergus tries to address the lords and their troops, but is at a loss for words, and Elinor helps him. The lords present their sons, but a fight breaks out after they laugh at Lord Dingwall and his son. Elinor forces Fergus to stop the fight, but the triplets instigate another one, and Fergus joins them. Elinor walks into the crowd and drags Fergus and the lords to the front, where she stops the fight and they apologize. Elinor informs the lords that according to their laws, only the firstborn of each family can be presented as champions in the games, to decide who will get betrothed to Mérida. Mérida pays attention to her mother's words and comes up with a plan to use this information to her advantage. She chooses archery as the game for the champions to play, and Elinor orders the games to begin. The games commence, and the champions prepare themselves. Unfortunately, Lord MacGuffin and Lord Macintosh's sons both miss the target, while Lord Dingwall's son, who barely knows how to use a bow and arrow, accidentally hits the target. As Fergus jokes that Mérida will have to marry him, he realizes that she isn't in her seat. Mérida enters and declares her intention to compete for her own hand in marriage. Despite Elinor's objections, Mérida successfully hits all the targets in the contest. Later in her room, Mérida is followed by her mother, who warns her about the consequences of her actions. Mérida refuses to go through with the betrothal, and in a fit of anger, cuts the tapestry her mother made. In response, Elinor takes Mérida's bow and throws it into the furnace. Mérida runs away crying, while Elinor realizes the severity of her actions and regrets her behavior. Mérida rides out of the castle on her trusty horse, Angus, and ventures into the woods. As they approach a circle of standing stones, Angus becomes frightened and stops running, causing Mérida to fall off his back. While exploring the area, Mérida sees some mysterious wisps and follows them to a small house, where she meets a witch. Mérida pays the witch with a necklace given to her by her mother and asks for a spell to change her fate. The witch uses her magic to make a cake and informs Mérida that her mother will change when she eats it. Mérida returns to the castle and gives the cake to Elinor, lying about making it herself. Elinor eats some of the cake and Mérida informs her that Fergus is distracting the lords, and a decision must be made. Elinor starts feeling uncomfortable, prompting Mérida to guide her to her room. As they pass by the lords, Elinor tells them that she'll make a decision once she feels better. When they reach Elinor's room, Mérida helps her into bed, but Elinor collapses onto the floor and transforms into a bear when she gets up. Mérida realizes that the witch who she had encountered earlier had turned her mother into a bear without changing her mind. Although Elinor remains aware of her surroundings, she cannot speak. Meanwhile, Fergus becomes aware of an odd noise and decides to investigate with the help of the lords and their men. Elinor eventually leaves her room and wanders the castle, despite Mérida's efforts to stop her. Maudie catches sight of the bear and runs away in terror, ultimately crossing paths with Fergus and the others. She tells them about spotting a bear and they quickly rush to the location. Mérida and Elinor hear the approaching group and Elinor rushes into a nearby room where she discovers the triplets causing mischief. Mérida joins them and explains her predicament, offering to treat them to dessert for an entire year if they assist in getting Elinor out of the castle. The triplets agree to help and cleverly deceive Fergus and the other lords, leading them in the wrong direction. Eventually, they lure them into the roof and trap them there. After successfully tricking Fergus and the other lords, Mérida and Elinor manage to leave the castle. As a reward for their help, Mérida tells the triplets they can eat anything they want. The mischievous triplets spot a cake that Mérida brought back and immediately devour it. Meanwhile, Fergus and the others use their tied-together pants as a rope to escape from the rooftop. Mérida takes her mother to the circle of standing stones, hoping to find the wisps, but they are nowhere to be found. While following Elinor into the woods, Mérida suddenly recalls the route to the witch's cottage. When Mérida and Elinor arrive at the witch's cottage, they find it empty. Mérida pulls a string that triggers the witch's cauldron, and the witch appears on a message, warning Mérida that the spell will become permanent by the second sunrise until she can repair the bond that has been damaged by pride. Suddenly, the cottage explodes, but Elinor protects Mérida from the blast. As Mérida sleeps, she remembers how much Elinor has always cared for her, even when she was a child. When she wakes up, Elinor gives her some berries to eat, but Mérida warns her that they are poisonous. They decide to go fishing instead, and Mérida catches some fish with her arrows, which they roast for their meal. They begin having fun in the stream. Mérida starts to notice that Elinor is behaving strangely. Suddenly, Elinor gets out of the water and heads into the woods. Mérida follows her and tries to stop her, but Elinor starts acting like a wild bear and even tries to attack her. Eventually, Elinor stops, and they both hear a strange noise that leads them further into the woods. They eventually come across a wisp which guides them to an abandoned castle. Mérida soon realizes that the castle is the same one from the story her mother had told her. While exploring, Mérida accidentally falls into a hole in the ground. After falling into the hole, Mérida finds herself in a throne room and sees a stone tapestry. She realizes that the torn bond referred to by the witch is actually the tapestry she had torn in anger. Suddenly, she remembers that the witch had mentioned performing the same spell on a prince who had become Mordu. Mordu then appears behind Mérida and attacks her. Despite Mérida shooting arrows at it, they have no effect on the beast. She quickly grabs Elinor's hand and Mordu emerges again. Elinor manages to bury Mordu under a pile of rocks as it continues to attack them, and they both run away to escape from the ferocious beast. Upon arriving at the standing stones, Mérida explains to Elinor that they need to return to the castle to fix the tapestry, or else she will suffer the same fate as Mordu and become a real bear forever. They manage to sneak back into the castle using a hidden door. Once inside, Mérida notices that Fergus and the lords are fighting amongst themselves. Elinor suggests they try to calm them down. Mérida distracts them by walking into the room while Elinor pretends to be a stuffed bear. She then instructs Mérida on what to say to the men. Mérida reminds the lords that they had abandoned their hatred for each other to come together and fight a common enemy. She then tells them that they must go against tradition and create their own story, encouraging them to work together for the good of their kingdom. After Mérida convinces the lords to choose their own love interest, Elinor prompts her to suggest that the people of the kingdom should be allowed to choose who they love at their own time. The lords agree with her, and to further distract them, Mérida suggests that they all celebrate by going to Fergus's cellar. While the lords are occupied, Mérida and Elinor sneak into Mérida's room to remove the tapestry. However, Fergus walks into his room and says that it has been destroyed by a bear. He rushes to Mérida's room and finds her with Elinor. Despite Mérida's explanations, Fergus doesn't believe that Elinor could have transformed into a bear. During their argument, Elinor loses consciousness and attacks them. She accidentally knocks Fergus down and realizes what she has done. Fergus, angry and confused, locks Mérida in her room. As Elinor flees the castle, Fergus and the lords pursue her. Meanwhile, Mérida discovers that the triplets have transformed into bears and instructs them to retrieve the key from Audie. Although Marty tries to run away, the bear catches up with her and takes the key, which they return to Mérida. She rides off with the tapestry, accompanied by the bears, and they soon encounter some wisps in the woods. The wisps guide them to the standing stones, where Elinor is being held captive, but unknown to them, Mor'du is watching and following them. When Mérida reaches the standing stones, she intervenes just in time to stop Fergus from killing Elinor, revealing that the triplets are the bear cubs. As Mor'du arrives, the lords attempt to stop it, but they are knocked down. Fergus attempts to kill Mor'du, but Mor'du easily knocks him away. As Mor'du is about to attack Mérida, Elinor breaks free from her restraints and engages in a fight with Mor'du. However, Mor'du overpowers her and throws her into a standing stone, causing it to crack. Elinor realizes that the stone is damaged and drags it to Mor'du. She then knocks Mor'du's head on the stone several times, causing it to rush towards her. The stone falls and crushes Mor'du, killing it. The prince's soul emerges from Mor'du and thanks Mérida for freeing it. It transforms into a wisp and flies away. As the second sunrise arrives, Mérida covers Elinor with a tapestry, but Elinor remains a bear. Mérida feels sad and starts crying, hugging her mother as she wishes to get her back. Mérida tells Elinor she loves her, and suddenly Elinor hugs her. Mérida realizes that Elinor has transformed back into a human, and Elinor kisses her. After the battle, Fergus is reunited with his wife, and the triplets return to their normal forms. They all return to the castle and bid farewell to the lords as they leave for their respective lands. However, Fergus soon discovers that the triplets have snuck onto one of the ships and is forced to retrieve them while Elinor and Mérida ride together in the forest as the lords depart. And that concludes our recap of the movie Brave. It's a timeless tale that showcases the courage and determination of its main character Mérida. But if you are a fan of brave heroes and heartwarming stories, then we've got another movie called Big Hero 6 that you surely have to watch. This movie features a young genius named Hero who teams up with a group of superheroes to save their city from a dangerous threat. With its stunning visuals, lovable characters, and thrilling action sequences, Big Hero 6 is a must-watch for anyone who loves a good adventure. So, click this video